My spoiled sister stole my savings, so I sold the car my parents bought her. My spoiled brat sister stole the money I had painstakingly saved to escape our family, all to buy herself the latest iPhone. So, while she was on a family vacation I wasn't invited to, I took the keys to the brand new car our parents had bought her, drove it to a used car lot, and sold it for cash. Then, I packed my bags, moved into the first apartment I could find, and vanished from their lives. My parents have always treated me and my sister, Amber, as if we were born on different planets. For as long as I can remember, she was the sun they orbited around, and I was a distant, barely there moon, only noticed when I eclipsed her light for a moment. Whenever there was a fight, a disagreement, or any kind of childhood squabble, the verdict was in before the trial even began. Amber was innocent, and I was the problem. I think the first time I truly understood the system we lived in, I was 8 years old. Our grandmother had passed away the year before, and my mother kept her ashes in a beautiful, antique porcelain vase on the mantelpiece. It was her most prized possession, a fragile link to the mother she had lost. One afternoon, Amber was practicing gymnastics in the living room, something she was expressly forbidden from doing. I was in my room, trying to read a book with my hands over my ears to block out the thumping. Suddenly, there was a sickening crash, followed by a dead silence that was somehow louder than the noise it replaced. I ran out to see the vase shattered on the hearth, a fine gray powder dusting the bricks and the carpet. Amber's eyes were wide with panic. When she saw me, a flicker of cold calculation replaced the fear. By the time my mother ran in, drawn by the noise, Amber was pointing a trembling finger at me, tears already streaming down her face. "Elise did it," she sobbed. She pushed it off. I tried to defend myself, to tell them that I was in my room, that I'd heard it happen, but it was useless. My words were just noise, static against the clear signal of Amber's perfect, tearful performance. My father looked at me with that familiar, heavy expression of disappointment. My mother was too distraught to even look at me. I was grounded for a whole week. My Game Boy was confiscated, and I had to spend every afternoon cleaning the house. Amber, for her bravery in telling the truth, was rewarded with a trip to her favorite restaurant and a new doll. She sat across from me at dinner that night, eating her takeout pizza while I picked at my plain pasta, a tiny, triumphant smirk playing on her lips whenever our parents weren't looking. This dynamic became the blueprint for our entire childhood. Our birthdays were a perfect example. Mine falls in a busy month for my parents' accounting business, so it was always an afterthought. A mumbled happy birthday in the morning, maybe a cupcake after dinner if I was lucky. They were just too busy working to celebrate. But Amber's birthday was a national holiday in our house. Weeks of planning, a huge party with all her friends, and a mountain of presents that fulfilled her every whim. Her demands grew more ridiculous with each passing year, but my parents never said no. At 12 years old, she needed the latest smartphone and she got it. At 14, it was a designer wardrobe that cost more than my entire bedroom set. Meanwhile, if I wanted a new pair of jeans because my old ones had holes in the knees, I had to present a formal case, followed by a week of begging and extra chores. The currency in our household wasn't love or kindness, it was grades. Amber was a straight-A student, effortlessly brilliant in a way that made teachers and my parents swoon. They would praise her endlessly, holding her up as the golden standard. I, on the other hand, was average. I wasn't a bad student, I got mostly BS, but I had to work incredibly hard for them. Late night studying, extra help sessions, endless flashcards, none of it mattered. In their eyes, B was just a polite word for failure. The dinner table often felt like a courtroom where I was perpetually on trial for the crime of not being my sister. "Maybe if you learned a thing or two from Amber, you wouldn't be such a disappointment," my father would say. Not cruelly, but with a kind of weary resignation that was somehow worse. Amber, of course, thrived on this. She took full advantage of her elevated status. Simple things like snatching the TV remote from my hand or taking my toys without asking were daily occurrences. Sharing was a one-way street. Her things were sacred, mine were communal property. But sometimes, her cruelty went beyond simple sibling squabbles. It felt targeted, designed to inflict the maximum amount of pain. The middle school field trip to the Science Museum was one of those times. I was so excited I could barely sleep for a week leading up to it. I'd saved up my own money for souvenirs and packed my bag days in advance. Amber saw my excitement, this rare flicker of joy in my otherwise gray existence, and she couldn't stand it. She decided to extinguish it. The night before the trip, she went to my parents with a somber face and told them a story she had concocted. She claimed she'd heard from her friends that I had been peeping on girls in the school washroom. It was a lie so absurd, so outlandish, that I thought my parents would laugh it off. To my shock and horror, they believed her. Instantly. Without a single question or a moment of doubt. They didn't call the school to verify. They didn't ask me for my side of the story. They simply looked at me with disgust and delivered my punishment. I was not allowed to go on the field trip. I stood there, my packed bag by the door, and felt something inside me break. It was the day I realized, with a cold, hard certainty, that my parents were never going to be on my side. They would always choose her story over my truth. After that, I started to pull away. I spent as much time as possible at my friend Marcus's house, where his parents treated me with a casual kindness that felt like a lifeline. I got a job in high school, bussing tables at a local diner, so I could pay for my own clothes, my own school supplies, my own life. Amber, naturally, received a generous allowance and never had to work a day. I was careful, saving every dollar I could, tucking it away in a shoebox hidden under a loose floorboard in my closet. My goal was simple and singular: move out the second I turned 18 and never look back. For her 16th birthday, my parents outdid themselves. They bought her a brand new Toyota Camry, cherry red, with a big bow on the hood. She, of course, made sure to rub it in my face at every opportunity. The car became her favorite new weapon. "Hey Elise, need a lift to work?" she'd call out as I was heading out the door to catch the bus. And just as I'd feel a flicker of hope, she'd add with a saccharine smile, "Oops, sorry. I can't be wasting my gas on useless people." As time went on, I learned to simply ignore her, to build a wall around myself and live within its confines. There were days when my parents and I didn't exchange a single word, and honestly, I preferred the silence to the constant criticism and punishment. Now my 18th birthday is just a few weeks away. I'd managed to save up a decent amount of money, enough to make a security deposit and cover the first month's rent on a small apartment. I'd been searching online, but finding a decent, affordable place was proving to be a challenge. So the money, a thick stack of bills in a sealed envelope, remained in its hiding place in my room. Every night before going to sleep, I'd pull up the floorboard and just look at it. It wasn't about counting it, it was about feeling the weight of it in my hand. It was the physical manifestation of my freedom. Then, I made a stupid, careless mistake. I was on the phone with Marcus, talking about my apartment search. My sister was home, and I thought she was in her room with her headphones on, but she must have been listening from the hallway. I mentioned that I had the deposit money saved up and was ready to go as soon as I found a place. The words were barely out of my mouth when my bedroom door burst open. Amber stood there, her hand on her hip, with that familiar, demanding look in her eye. "I want to buy the new iPhone 15, she announced, as if it were a royal decree. "So, do you think you could share some of that money with me?"
I sökte här.
Dumbfounded. She had already asked her parents, who, for the first time I could remember, had actually said no. Their finances were a bit tight at the moment, they'd told her. The sheer audacity of her, to come to me, to ask for the money I had earned bussing greasy tables and dealing with rude customers, was breathtaking. I told her a firm, unequivocal no. "This money is for my apartment, Amber. It's for my future. If you want a new phone, get a job like I did." Her face twisted into a mask of pure indignation. The very suggestion that she, the golden child, should have to work for something was the gravest insult I could have possibly delivered. She scoffed, turned on her heel, and stormed out of my room. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, thinking, foolishly, that it was over. The next day, I came home from work to a scene of triumph in the living room. Amber was prancing around, showing off her shiny new iPhone 15 to our parents. "I bought it with my own money," she declared proudly, and my parents were fawning over her, praising her for being so independent and resourceful. A cold dread washed over me. I immediately bolted up the stairs to my room. It looked like a tornado had hit it. My drawers were pulled out, their contents strewn across the floor. My closet was a mess, my clothes in a heap. I scrambled to the loose floorboard, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pulled it up. The envelope was there, but it felt light. I tore it open. The money was gone. She hadn't taken all of it. She had carefully counted out the exact amount the new phone would have cost, down to the dollar. A white-hot rage, unlike anything I had ever felt before, surged through me. I flew back down the stairs and confronted her, my voice shaking with fury. "Give me back my money," I screamed. My father immediately stepped in front of me, his hand on my shoulder, telling me to calm down. I explained everything, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush, how she'd stolen my savings, the money I needed to move out, to finally have a life of my own. "She has to give it back," I pleaded, tears of frustration streaming down my face. "She stole it. I'll report her to the police for theft." But it was like talking to a brick wall. Just like when we were 8, they took her side without a moment's hesitation. "Your sister would never lie about something like that," my mother said, her voice cold and clipped. "You're just jealous of her independence, and you're trying to undermine her." Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Amber smirking, that same triumphant look she'd had over the pizza all those years ago. My parents told me to apologize to her immediately. I refused. "I can prove it," I said, my voice desperate. "Look at my room. It's been ransacked." But they wouldn't listen. They were completely, willfully blind to their perfect daughter's flaws and to my own pain. It was in that moment that something in me finally, irrevocably, snapped. The part of me that had always craved their approval, that had hoped one day they would finally see me, just died. I decided right then and there that I was done. But I was going to get my money back first, one way or another. I knew the three of them, my mother, my father, and their perfect daughter, were going on their annual beach vacation the following week. A trip I was, as usual, not invited to. So, I waited. I put on a mask of indifference, acting as if I didn't care that Amber had stolen from me. For the next few days, she would taunt me, walking past me in the hallway and whispering, "Hope your money's safe," with a malicious grin. I would just smile back calmly and reply, "I hope so, too." And I would wait. The day they left, the house was blissfully, beautifully silent. I walked into Amber's pristine room, a place I was normally forbidden from entering, and took her car keys from the little ceramic bowl on her dresser. I drove her cherry red Camry, the symbol of her status and my exclusion, to the nearest used car dealership. I didn't haggle. I didn't care about getting the best price. I just asked what they would give me for it in cash right now. I'm sure I got less than half of what the car was actually worth. But it didn't matter. The thick stack of cash they handed me was more than what she had stolen. It was justice. I spent the rest of the day frantically calling apartment listings. I found a small, slightly rundown one-bedroom that was available immediately. I paid the deposit and the first month's rent in cash, then spent the next few hours moving all of my belongings out of that house. I packed my clothes, my books, the few sentimental items I had. By the time the sun set, it was as if I had never lived there. Before I left for the last time, I blocked their numbers on my phone. I deleted and blocked them from my social media. I left no forwarding address. I made sure they had absolutely no way of contacting me. I regret that I wasn't there to see Amber's face when she came back from her sun-soaked vacation to find her parking spot empty and her older sister gone, erased from her life as completely as she had tried to erase me. I thought I was finally free of that toxic, suffocating environment, but I never expected my sister to track me down. And when she did something so crazy, so vindictive, that I realized this was far from over. I needed to protect myself, but I had no idea where to even start. I had spent my entire life on the defensive, reacting to Amber's schemes rather than trying to anticipate them. Now, I had to think like her, calculating, strategic, and always one step ahead. The first thing I did was a complete digital lockdown. I spent an entire evening hunched over my laptop, fueled by cheap coffee and pure adrenaline, changing every single password I had. Email, social media, online banking, even my library account. Everything was updated with new, complex passwords, long strings of random letters, numbers, and symbols that even a supercomputer would struggle to guess. I set up two-factor authentication on every account that offered it. If she wanted to get into my digital life now, she'd need physical possession of my phone. It felt like building a fortress, one brick at a time. Next, I called my bank. I explained that I suspected my sister was trying to access my accounts. The customer service representative was sympathetic in that bland, scripted way. "We don't see any successful logins from unrecognized devices, ma'am," she said, her voice tinged with a boredom that suggested this was her 10th call like this before lunch. "But we can put a security alert on your account if you're concerned." "Yes, please," I said, gripping the phone tightly. I asked if they could trace where the login attempts were coming from, but she informed me they didn't have that information available. It was frustrating, but not surprising. My new apartment, which had felt like a sanctuary, a symbol of my hard-won freedom, now seemed vulnerable. I found myself checking the locks on my door and windows constantly, jumping at every creak in the hallway or siren in the distance. My peace was short-lived. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You'll regret this. I promise." 5 simple words that sent a chill down my spine. It was Amber. I blocked the number without replying, but the message lingered. This was a declaration of war. The next morning, I woke up to an email that made my stomach drop. It was a confirmation for a credit card application in my name. I stared at the screen, a wave of nausea washing over me. I immediately called the credit card company to report the fraud. The representative informed me, in that same detached voice, that this wasn't the first application. "I'm seeing 3 credit card applications under your name in the past week, ma'am," she said, rattling off the names of 2 other major banks. 2 of them were approved. 2. Approved. The words echoed in my head. That's impossible. I didn't apply for any of those. "Well, someone did," she replied, "using your social security number and personal information." Identity theft. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. She hadn't just stolen my cash. She was trying to steal my entire future. Then I remembered. The old metal filing cabinet in my parents' home office. It was where they kept all the important family documents, birth certificates, passports, social security cards. It was never locked. Why would it be? They never imagined one of their children would raid it to commit federal crimes against the other. Amber had everything she needed. I immediately went online to check my credit report. The screen loaded to reveal a list of recent hard inquiries from multiple credit card companies and, to my absolute horror, an auto loan application from 2 days prior, the day after I sold her car. She was trying to finance a new one, a much nicer one, using my good credit. A Mercedes, I would later find out. Of course. She wasn't just replacing what she'd lost. She was upgrading, and she was planning to stick me with the bill for the rest of my life. My phone rang again, another unknown number. This time, I answered, my heart pounding. It was a woman from the auto finance company calling to follow up on my application. That application is fraudulent, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. The woman, Sandra, became much more helpful then, advising me to file a police report immediately. A police report? It meant officially accusing my sister of a crime. It felt like crossing a Rubicon, a point of no return in our already shattered relationship. But what choice did I have? She was trying to systematically destroy my financial life before it had even begun. I took a deep breath and drove to the police station. I sat in a hard plastic chair, filling out forms under the harsh fluorescent lights, the reality of my situation crashing down on me. I was reporting my own sister to the police. Officer Reynolds, the cop who took my statement, was an older man with tired eyes that seemed to have seen every kind of human ugliness. He listened patiently as I laid out the whole story. So, your sister stole your identity, he summarized, his pen scratching against the form. And in retaliation, you sold her car. My face flushed with shame. It wasn't technically her car, I mumbled, knowing how weak it sounded. But the vehicle wasn't registered in your name, was it? He asked, his gaze sharp. No, I admitted. He looked at me over the top of his glasses. So, you sold a vehicle that didn't belong to you. Your sister could file charges against you for that, you know. I left the police station feeling 100 times worse than when I went in. My act of righteous revenge was, in the eyes of the law, a crime. I had wanted justice, but I just handed Amber another weapon to use against me. When I got back to my apartment, there was a note taped to my door, written in Amber's loopy, unmistakable script. I know what you did at the police station. Two can play at that game. She was watching me, or she had someone watching me. I hurried inside, my safe haven now feeling like a cage. I was spiraling, so I called Marcus. I laid out the whole mess, including my own potential legal trouble over the car. You need a lawyer, he said, without a hint of judgment. He gave me the number for a friend of his, Ellie Young, an attorney who specialized in identity theft. I called her immediately and managed to get a consultation for the next day. Ellie was a lifesaver. She was young, sharp, and had a no-nonsense demeanor that instantly put me at ease. Here's the situation, she said after I had explained everything. You both have potentially committed crimes. Her identity theft is far more serious, but selling a car that isn't yours is still conversion of property. It could become a mutual assured destruction situation. She advised me to freeze my credit immediately and to document everything. Every text, every email, every fraudulent application. And most importantly, she told me not to speak to my family without consulting her first. I left her office with a clear action plan, a flicker of hope in the overwhelming darkness. But the next day, a detective from the county sheriff's office called. My parents had done it. They had officially reported the car stolen, and they had named me as the suspect. Ellie met me at the sheriff's office. Detective Wilson was stern, but he listened as Ellie laid out our side of the story. The history of theft, the identity fraud, presenting the thick file of evidence I had already compiled. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in a figure of authority. He took copies of my evidence and said he would need to coordinate with the city police. The investigation was ongoing. The final straw came a few days later. I got an email from a loan officer at my bank confirming an appointment to discuss a mortgage application. A mortgage? For $350,000. Amber wasn't just playing with credit cards anymore. She was trying to bury me in a mountain of debt so vast I would never climb out. I forwarded the email to Ellie, my hands trembling. She called me back almost immediately, and her voice was strangely calm. "This is good," she said. "Good? How is this possibly good?" I asked, pacing my tiny apartment. "Because mortgage fraud is a federal crime," she explained. "And we're going to set a trap." The plan was as terrifying as it was brilliant. I would keep the appointment. Ellie would come with me, posing as my financial advisor. We would alert the bank manager and the police beforehand. And then we would wait. The day of the appointment, I was a nervous wreck. We sat in the bank manager's office, watching the lobby through a one-way mirror. The minutes ticked by like hours. Then, at exactly 2 p.m., she walked in. Amber. She was dressed like me, her hair styled like mine. She sat down at the loan officer's desk and began to confidently discuss the terms of the mortgage, presenting a forged ID and a stack of fake pay stubs. The level of her deception was chilling. After a few minutes, Ellie nodded to the bank manager. He made a quiet phone call. Two uniformed police officers walked into the loan officer's office. The look of pure, unadulterated shock on Amber's face as they placed her in handcuffs was something I will never forget. Her mask of cool confidence shattered, replaced by a raw, animal panic. That evening, my mother called, her voice choked with tears and rage. "How could you have your own sister arrested?" she cried. I explained, calmly and rationally, that Amber had been caught in the act of committing a felony. "She says it's all a misunderstanding," my mother insisted, "that you gave her permission." The willful blindness was still there, as strong as ever. And then the manipulation. "Your father had another episode after we heard," she said, her voice dropping. "His heart. He's in the hospital. He's asking for you." I went to the hospital the next morning, my stomach in knots. My father looked smaller in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors and in 4. He asked my mother to leave the room. And then, the words I had waited my entire life to hear came out of his mouth. "I don't blame you," he said, his voice weak. "We saw the evidence. The fake ID, the documents. I haven't been a good father to you. I favored your sister. I made excuses.
I can see that now. I'm sorry."
The apology, coming from this man who had never once admitted fault, was so stunning it left me speechless. He explained that it was always just easier to give in to Amber, to placate her, and that he'd told himself I was strong enough to not need his support. Tears streamed down my face, tears of grief for the childhood I'd lost, and tears of a strange, painful relief. My mother was waiting outside the door. She had heard. "Is it true?" she asked, her own eyes filled with a dawning horror and doubt. "All of it." "Yes," I said. "It's true." For the first time, she seemed to see past the perfect image she had constructed of her favorite daughter. The foundation of her world was cracking. As I left the hospital, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. My future was still uncertain. Amber was facing serious jail time. My family was broken, perhaps irreparably. But for the first time, the truth was out in the open. For the first time, I felt seen. And for the first time, I felt free. The future was a blank page, and I was finally the one holding the pen.